President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We hand over again the floor to the prosecution to continue questioning the witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I had finished asking you questions about the subject of pagodas and religion in Mondulkiri. And I wanted now to ask you a few more questions about the subject of cooperatives, which is one of the subjects that you testified had been discussed by Pol Pot and Noon Shea at the 3-day meeting in Phnom Penh you attended. Can you start by telling the Chamber what you recall Pol Pot or Noon Shea saying about the organization of cooperatives at the 3-day meeting you attended in Phnom Penh?
Response. Regarding the cooperative, initially he talked about the low-level cooperative encompassing 30 to 40 families per each cooperative.
And who is it that was talking about low-level cooperatives?
Response. Mr. Pol Pot discussed this matter regarding the organization of the cooperative.
And was Pol Pot providing the cadres who were at this meeting instructions to set up low-level cooperatives? Was that the purpose of the communication as you understood it?
Response. He talked about the low-level cooperative which were in the form of 10 or 20 families per each cooperative.
Yes, my question is whether Pol Pot was asking you and the other cadres to implement low-level cooperatives in your regions.
Response. Yes, he gave such instructions to organize the low-level cooperatives because it will be difficult to organize a large cooperative, as it will be difficult to manage the food supply for the cooperative.
And was there any discussion or instructions at this meeting about communal dining?
Response. Yes, the matter was discussed. For instance, the district, the commune, and the village levels all discussed and agreed for the communal dining.
And when you went back to Mondulkiri after this meeting, what was done to implement the instruction you had received about low-level cooperatives and communal dining?
Response. Upon my return to Mondulkiri, the chief of the sector convened a meeting again to provide further details regarding that instruction, because what we learned from the meeting previously was only a principle, and then more detailed information was provided by the sector regarding how many families were to be put in each cooperative.
Who all was asked to attend this meeting that was convened by the sector chief on the issue of establishing cooperatives?
Response. All the district secretaries or committees had to attend that meeting.
And what instruction did you receive at that meeting as to the number of families to put in each cooperative?
Response. The instruction was clearly given, as I stated earlier, regarding how many members people were to be put in each cooperative, because if the number is too large, it's going to be difficult for food supply. And if people were to live close to each other, then such a group shall be formed for that cooperative.
Let me ask you this. My colleague, you told my colleague that prior to April 1975, there had been groups, I believe you called them solidatory groups that had been established. How were the groups that had been established prior to April 1975 different than the lower level cooperatives that were implemented after your meeting in Phnom Penh?
Response. Prior to 1975, the solidarity groups were formed. It was a kind of a mutual assistance group to assist each other in rice farming.
And how were lower level cooperatives different than those mutual assistance groups? What was different about cooperatives?
Response. It was different. The mutual assistance group was mainly focused on the work, but the eating was separate. However, in the cooperative, it was a communal dining.
Who was it that decided the rations of food that were allocated to each cooperative?
Response. In each cooperative, there was a committee which was formed for the distribution of a ration, including food, meat, for example.
Were there any instructions provided either from the sector level or higher level than that as to the amount of food rations that could be provided to each person?
Response. The instruction was from the sector to the district and the district to the cooperative respectively.
You told us yesterday that there were 3,000 citizens who lived in your district, Pichchenda district. How many people in total lived in Mondulkiri province as of April 1975?
Response. I could not grasp the figure. I only knew about the figure in my district but not in other districts.
Turn now to the question of the subject of currency, the prohibition on currency and the closing of markets, two other subjects that you had indicated were discussed at the three-day meeting you attended in Phnom Penh. Can you tell us in more detail what Noon Chea or Pol Pot said at that meeting about the prohibition on currency and the closing of markets?
Response. As I stated already, that was the announcement, and later on they declared that the people would be brought back into the city and the money would be put back into circulation.
What did they say about the reason for closing the markets and prohibiting the use of currency?
Response. I did not understand the reason, as that was the matter of the upper level. I could only tell you what I knew then.
And do you recall, was there any discussion about the elimination of private property?
Response. Yes, that matter was discussed. Private belongings or properties shall be put communally. And as for the cattle shall be put communally for common use within the cooperative.
And when you returned to Mondulkiri after this meeting, what was done to close the markets and to remove currency from the province?
Response. I did not know because There had been no market in that area even before the liberation. Yes, money was circulated before 1970, but there had been no market due to the heavy bombardment. So people fled and scattered, and some fled into the forest.
When was it that the markets had stopped operating in Mondulkiri province? Can you tell us the year?
Response: it stopped operating since before the liberation. There was no market, no exchange of goods, not even in the provincial town. And that applies to the rural areas as well. The main cause was due to the heavy bombardment. The bombardments sometimes took place 4 or 5 times per day.
To the best of your recollection, can you tell us which years or what time period these bombings took place?
Response: it started from 1970. That was the date of the liberation of Mondulkiri, and the bombardment continued until 1975. Bombardment was almost on a daily basis within this period.
And on the question of currency, after the instruction had been provided at the meeting in Phnom Penh that currency was prohibited, was any effort made in Mondulkiri to collect currency notes from the people?
Response: no, it was not collected. So people kept their personal currency notes.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. Let me return to the question of the Vietnamese for a moment. We talked already a little bit about the instruction that had been one of the issues that had been discussed regarding the evacuation of Vietnamese. What I wanted to ask you is, did Nuon Chea or Pol Pot give any explanation during this meeting as to the reason that the party wanted to evacuate Vietnamese people from the country?
Response: I did not understand that matter clearly, and I am honest here. That was the matter of the upper echelon, so I could not understand everything.
Prior to the meeting in Phnom Penh, were there any Vietnamese nationals or persons of Vietnamese ethnicity who were living in Mondulkiri province?
Response: no, there wasn't any Vietnamese living in Mondulkiri then.
And was there any discussion at this meeting in Phnom Penh about dispatching troops to the Vietnamese border?
Response. I did not understand that matter because that was a matter of the upper echelon.
Was there a period of time when a military division was assigned to the Mondulkiri area?
Yes, there was. One military division was dispatched to the station located in province.
And which division was that?
That was Division 920.
And when was it that Division 920 was dispatched to and stationed in Mondulkiri?
Response. It was in late 1975.
Where in Mondulkiri was the division based? Were the soldiers stationed throughout the province, or were they concentrated in certain areas?
Response. The division was based in Koh Nhai district. And the deployment of the regiment was in various locations, including Pachanda, Srai Pok, etc.
Were the soldiers concentrated on the border regions, or were they spread throughout the province?
Response. The deployment was district based. For example, one deployment at Pachanda, one is at Srai Pok, and another deployment was at Orang district.
How many Division 920 soldiers were stationed in your district, Pichinda district?
Response. I cannot recall it, and I did not know actually how many soldiers were stationed in my district because there was the decision of the upper echelon.
You testified a few moments ago that the division office was in Konek district. Where was it located in relation to the sector office?
Response. The distance from Pachanda district to Koh Nhai district is 1 day travel. As I stated earlier, the deployment of the troops was at that Pichinda district itself.
I think you may have misunderstood my question. If I understood you correctly, the headquarters of the division, was that located in Pichinda district or was that in Connect district?
Response. It was at Kohnyak district. Kohnyak district was actually the office of the division, the military division, where they have their main base there.
So my question was, how close or how far was the division office in Connect district from the sector office that you have described for us earlier today? Were they close to each other?
But
Response. Yes, it was about 200 meters away from the sector office.
Did the leaders of the sector and the leaders of Division 920 work together and coordinate on common matters related to Mandalkari, the Mandalkari region?
but
Response. I could not grasp that situation. That was the affair of the division, and I was busy at my district.
Let me ask you then, with regard to your own district, did you have any communications or contact with the cadres from Division 920 who are responsible for the soldiers located in your district, in Pichinda district?
Response. Yes. They contacted me because they came from far away and they did not know the geographical area well. So they came for assistance from the district, and then we explained to them the geography of the location.
Did you have any regular meetings with them?
Response. No, there was no meeting. When they came to discuss with us some matters, in particular in regard to geography. However, meetings took place at the sector office and the division office there.
Are you saying that there was meetings between the sector and division offices that occurred in Connect district? Is that what you're saying?
Response. Yes, the district military usually held the meeting at the district level. As for the sector military, they would hold their meeting at the sector level And of course, military instructions were given down from the sector level to the district level.
To complete my questions to you about the 3-day meeting in Phnom Penh, at that meeting, was there any discussion about the importance of identifying or screening enemies who had infiltrated the ranks of the party? Was that a subject that was discussed at all at the 3-day meeting in Phnom Penh?
Response: I did not hear about that subject on screening or identifying enemies.
Did you ever hear the term enemies burrowing from the inside?
Response: No, I didn't.
And at the 3-day meeting in Phnom Penh, was there any discussion of minority peoples such as the Cham or Islamic people?
Response: That I did not hear it either, because the decision would be made by those who were at the higher level. I was at the lower level, so I was not informed of that matter.
Were there any Cham people who lived in Mondulkiri province in April 1975?
Respond: No, there weren't.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. I turn now to a new subject, the question about marriage during the democratic Kampuchea regime. Can you describe for the Chamber what the party's policy on marriage was during the DK regime?
Response: The organization of the wedding ceremony for the combatants took place in multiple couples at the time, or some other times they may arrange the marriage one couple at a time, and in most cases we also ask their parent whether or not they approve the marriage, and we also ask individual bride and groom as well whether or not they love each other.
You just used the word combatants. Who are you referring to by combatants?
Response: Combatants were referred to those who were married.
Did you ever attend a meeting with Pol Pot in which he talked about marriages and the policy on marriages.
Respond. No, I never attended the meeting to discuss on this matter with him. It was those who were at the upper level who decided to arrange the marriage for them. And the marriage may be for many couples at a time or for a single couple. So whenever there was a request and there was mutual consent between the groom and the bride, then we would arrange the wedding for them. And again, they had to mutually agree to get married on top of the approval by respective parents.
Mr. President, I would like at this point to read an excerpt from one of the interviews of the witness, which is document E3/384, and the site is at Khmer ERN 00345-904 through 345-905, English ERN 00348-373, and French ERN 00354-237. If I could have permission to put that on the screen, and then I will read and ask the witness about it.
The President, what is the title of this document?
It is one of the interviews of the witness. I believe his third interview by the co-investigating judges. And it's document E3/384.
President, thank you. You may proceed. And support staff, please put this document up on the screen.
And Mr. Witness, in one of your interviews to the co-investigating judges, you were asked the question, what was the policy on marriage? And this is the answer you gave, quote, I went to a meeting with Pol Pot, I don't remember when, and he said to marry them in couples. 2 or 3 couples could be married to not make it too difficult. But in actuality, a single couple could also be married. The persons or relatives that lived in different cooperatives or different sectors could attend, and the bride and groom had to rise to make a resolution announcing their biographies and their loyalty to one another. Do you confirm today that you attended a meeting at which Pol Pot made these statements regarding marriage?
Response. I confirm this statement. And of course, Pol Pot gave that instruction, and then it was handed down to us at the sector level and district level. And we had to ask for approval from the couples, and then we had to seek approval from their parents as well. So we had to ask for consent from the family members and parents of the bride and groom. and then after that they had to commit themselves to be husband and wife.
Where did this meeting with Pol Pot, where he provided instructions on marriage, where did this meeting take place?
បាទដូចខ្ញុំជម្រាប
Response. As I said earlier, it was during the meeting of, I cannot recall it on the top of my head, but I said it earlier.
Was this one of the meetings that you attended in Phnom Penh?
បាទ
Response. Yes, it was a meeting in Phnom Penh.
How many other people were present for this meeting?
ហើយខ្ញុំ
Response. I cannot recall the exact number of people attended that meeting, and I dare not ask them how many participants participated, but what I noticed was that there were large number of people.
Was this one of the meetings in which there were representatives from all regions present?
បាទ
Response. Yes, participants were from all the regions across the country. Each region sent a number of representatives. So they were from all regions.
You indicated in your statement that as part of the marriage, the bride and groom had to rise and make a resolution announcing their biographies. What was the reason that the people getting married had to announce their biographies?
អានឹង
Response. When they were pronounced husband and wife, they had to commit to one another that they would love each other for the rest of their life.
What was it that they were required to say about their biographies, though? What information did they have to say about their personal biographies?
បាទ
Response. Before they got married, they had to give their biography.
And what type of information was it that they had to provide as part of that biography?
អត់មាន
Response. It was nothing but first they had to mention their name and family names as well as their relatives. That was in the biography. Of course, the date of birth and place of birth of individual person.
In the meeting that you attended where Pol Pot talked about marriages, Was there any discussion about the importance of conducting marriages and increasing the population in the country? Was that a subject that was discussed at this meeting?
Bad.
Response. He talked about it in general terms. He mentioned the general principle that in certain locations that he mentioned such thing.
Can you recall receiving any instructions from Pol Pot or other leaders about the need to increase the population in the country?
Response. I didn't hear about it, except that I got information about marriage policy. But as for the policy to increase the population, I did not hear it, but it was common sense that when people got married, they would produce children and population would increase.
Were people who were married by Angkar expected to produce children?
Response. Naturally, when a couple get married, 1 or 2 years later they would bear children. Of course, some people may not have children for many years after their marriage because they are infertile or so.
Were husbands and wives allowed to live together in the same room during the Democratic Kampuchea regime?
Response. Yes, they were allowed to live together. If they stay in any unit, and they would stay together in that unit.
Could people be married during the Democratic Kampuchea regime without the approval and involvement of Angkar?
Bad.
Response. Well, there must be approval from their unit, and they had to report it to the upper authority in that unit before the wedding was organized.
What was your understanding as to the reason that the party was involved in marriages and that approval had to be attained from units in order for people to get married? What was your understanding of why that was?
But people.
Response. Because when people love each other, and if they do, they had to report to their head of a unit. But most important of all, the couple had to love each other, and then they reported it to the respective leader in that unit, and then after there was an approval from the leader of the unit, then the matter was brought to the parents, and subject to the parents' approval, then the couple would get married.
During the time that you were the secretary of Pichchenda district, how often were marriages conducted?
But
Response. In my capacity as the secretary of the district, I organize the marriage only once. The President, it appears that there is a problem with the translation system, so can you please check, court officer, with the translation team? Sir President, prosecutor, you may continue now.
Yes, Mr. Witness, I was saying that we've been talking primarily about the period during which you were the secretary of Pichchenda district, and I now want to start moving towards a later part of the regime. Can you tell the chamber whether at one point Secretary Lang died during the Democratic Kampuchea regime? And I don't want you to tell us about the details of that now, because I'm going to come back to that later. So I simply want to ask now, did Secretary Lang die at some point during the Democratic Kampuchea regime?
Response. He died during the Democratic Kampuchea period in 1978.
And when Lang died, who was asked to replace him?
But
Response. I was asked to replace him. Following the general meeting, they designated me to take his place. And this general meeting was held in mid-September, and there was an election as well, and I was elected the secretary to replace him. But I assume that office for only 2 months. I assumed that position for 2 months from October or so, and then Vietnamese troop came in at the end of that year.
I understand your testimony about when your formal appointment came, and we'll come back and talk about that later. I do want to ask you, though, now you just mentioned that in September 1978 you were elected to that position. Who was it that elected you to formally assume the position of Secretary of Sector 105?
Response. I did not know who elected me, but in terms of the designation, Pol Pot designated me to take the place of Lang after he died. And I assumed that official position for only 2 months, as I said earlier.
We will talk about 1978 in a little while. But first I want to talk about the year 1977 and the events that led up to Lang's death. Do you recall a person, and one of the things that I'm going to be asking you about from 1977 is what happened to some of the people who were fellow district secretaries of yours and members of the sector committee during that year. And I wanted to start by asking you about whether you recall a person who was named Mala.
Response. I do not get your question. Can you please repeat it?
My question is, do you remember a person named Ma La?
Response. Yes, I do.
And can you tell us who he was? What positions he held?
Response. He was my predecessor of Pichanda district.
During what time period was Mala the secretary of Pichchinda district?
He was the secretary of Pichanda district in 1974. No, he actually took my place because I was removed to O Buon Le.
Okay, let's talk about that period just for a moment here. What was it that you were assigned to do in O Buon Lu in 1974?
Response. I was assigned to that place because they relocated people from the mountainous areas, and the former official over there did not speak Phnom, so I spoke Phnom at that time, so I was assigned to lead that community. I could communicate with them in Phnom, so they appointed me to Koh Nhej district.
I believe yesterday that you testified that 1974 was the year that you held a position on the Foreign Relations Committee for Sector 105, and that 1975 was the year you held a position as a sector member responsible for health. Were you performing either of those assignments when you were reassigned to Konek District in 1974?
Response. I was transferred to that location, as I stated earlier, in order to work with those people coming down from the mountainous area, as the former officers there could not speak the tribal language. So those people at the Konya district, I mean the administrative people, did not speak Phnom language, though they spoke Tumpun or other languages. And of course I knew Phnom language, and I could communicate with the people from the mountainous area, and I was assigned to work with them, as they could not speak Khmer language clearly.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. When was it that you resumed your position as Peach Chenda District Secretary?
Response. I had held that position since 1971, as I said earlier.
Unless I misunderstood you, you indicated that Mala assumed that position for a period of time when you had been transferred to Orban Lu. So my question is, when did you return from Orban Lu and resume being Secretary of Peach Chinda District?
Response. Yes, that was correct. Initially, I was relocated or transferred to work with the people from the mountainous area, and then Mala went to Pachana district. But because Mala could not speak the tribal language, I was then sent back to Pachana district.
And do you remember when, in relation to the 17th of April 1975, you went back to Peach Chinda District? When did that happen?
Response. In 1974, I was transferred, and in 75, Phnom Penh was liberated. People from the mountainous area were relocated to Konya district, although that area was still known as part of the Pachanda district. And I went to manage them in 1975. I meant to manage those people coming down from the mountainous area.
What happened to Mala when you returned and resumed your position as Secretary of Peach Chinda District?
Response. I could not grasp this matter that because it was the matter of the upper decision. Because I myself was reassigned, then assigned back, and then reassigned again, so it was rather confusing. I only had to follow the instructions that I was given for the reassignment, that's all.
Did Mala disappear in 1977?
Response. Yes. He was called by the sector and I did not know where he went. I only knew that he was taken through the sector. That was all.
Where was he working at the time he was called by the sector and disappeared?
Response. I didn't know as well. I didn't know where he had worked before he was called. I only focused on the affairs within my district.
Was he a member of your district committee?
Response. Yes, he was within the same district committee. And later on, he was assigned as the district secretary.
Did Mala used to reside in Hanoi?
Response. Yes, he studied in Hanoi.
And do you know the reason why he was called by the sector and disappeared in 1977?
Response. I did not know the reason because I contemplated only on the work within my district. I did not know about the removal of any person.
Can you tell us whether there was a period of time when cadres who had connections to Vietnam were purged by the party?
Response. No, I did not know anything whether there was a purge or not. My only focus, as I said earlier, was the works within my district, and I did not know about the affairs of the upper echelon.
You mentioned yesterday a person named May, who was someone that you went with on one of your trips to Kampong Thom. And you told us yesterday that May was a member of the Sector 105 committee. Did May disappear in 1977?
Response. May disappeared around 1977 as well, but I did not know the reason for his disappearance.
Do you recall the exact time period in 1977 when May disappeared?
Response. No, I cannot recall that. I cannot recall the exact date. As I said, that was the matters of the sector, and I only focus on the work within my district, that the situation in my district was peaceful and that the people in my district had enough to eat. The President, thank you, Mr. Witness, and thank you, the prosecutor. We will have a 20-minute break and we shall resume at 3 p.m. to continue our proceeding. Court officer, could you assist the witness during the break, as well as the duty counsel, and have them back in the courtroom at 3 p.m.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ